Side 2 begins with James and the Cold Gun. Initially, EMI wanted this to be the first lead single for the album, but Kate insisted on Wuthering Heights to be the lead single, so there we have it. And while that was a good choice to go with, I could easily imagine this being a later single, after Moving, The Man with a Child in His Eyes, and Strange Phenomena. This song is possibly one of Kate's more rockier tracks, albeit still tame compared to the punk rock scene at the time. Starting off with a nice jaunty piano riff before Ian Benson's guitar and Stuart Elliott's percussion come into play once more. Kate calls for James to come on home, almost similar case as with Heathcliff in the previous song. She then goes on to bring up how we can't let our hero die alone, and we miss you day and night. Well, that's what happens when you kicked him out of town when he wasn't able to pay his rent exactly on time. Actually, she soon reveals that he left town not because he was forced out, but rather so he could live by the rifle, implying that he's a soldier going off to war. Kate will explore a similar anti-war theme with another song, Army Dreamers, from her Never Forever album. In the chorus, she asks if we, or he, remembers Jeannie from the casino. I certainly remember. I ain't never had a friend like him. And although he still owes me 50 quid after that botched game of Texas Hold'em. I think Big Jack Films was there too. Or at least someone who looked like him. Actually, Kate refers to this genie as a she, as she's still awaiting in a big brass bed. Boy, Shantae seems to have some strange secrets. Now, at first, with this James character and the mention of guns in a casino, it may seem to be about James Bond. Or possibly about James of Team Rocket after he broke up with Jessie and Meowth. But apparently this was said to be inspired by the Frederick Forsyth novel The Day of the Jackal and its film adaptation. I haven't exactly read or seen either, so I don't exactly know for sure if that is the case. So anyone who has, feel free to correct me on it. Then as we hear more of that Hammond organ by Duncan McKay, Kate asks if James is selling his soul to a cold gun. But as it turns out, he's actually selling his kidney to a hot glue gun. In the next verse, she questions where James' heart lies. Not there in the buckskin or in the gin that makes you laugh long and loud. Actually, he left his heart at Tokyo, down by the river, don't you know? He had to let it go, and nobody knows that. She then calls him out on being a coward, running away from humanity and running out on reality. But soon after another chorus, the music suddenly turns into this slow melodic mood, where Kate's voice, the piano and the organ seem to be all that remained left for a moment before the guitar and drums come back again just as slow and somber. Almost like a funeral march, as if James had just died in battle and were now mourning for him. Then the song fades out altogether. It's quite honestly another one of Kate Bush's underrated tracks in my opinion, proving of course that you can build a character and a story just with the medium of music. I say give this one a chance to listen to, unless it gives you the cold shoulder, or cold gun in this case. Then we really start to feel things with Feel It. Like The Man with the Child in His Eyes, it's a piano-centric ballad. However, this is almost entirely nothing but that piano and Kate's tender, heavenly vocal. As for its lyrics, it's basically about sex and lovemaking. Yeah, even from a mile away, you can tell what it's about. But that doesn't necessarily make it bad though, just kind of obvious. After a party, Kate's taken by a romantic interest to his, or possibly her or their parlour, where they have a little nervous laughter while locking the door and Kate's stockings fall onto the floor. Likely because of how stacked full of presents they are to the point they're falling off the top of the fireplace. And then in that central chorus, Kate repeatedly orders to, or other him or her or them, to feel it. Feel it, my love. To feel this new bedsheet and quilt cover is a new teddy fabric. Now, I'm pretty sure you already know what she actually refers to. And I think it might be best that we leave that to our imaginations, lest I get demonetized or worse. That is, if I even am monetized to begin with. So, yeah, while it's obvious what the song is about, it still portrays such with good grace and sweet sensation, without making it sound too risque or raunchy that it ends up becoming cheesy or corny. Next, we have "Ode to Be in Love." This too is a simple yet eccentric tune about being in love in general, feeling trapped in such, and questioning whether it's enjoyed or not. David Patten, who plays both the acoustic and bass here, does so quite well, as does Andrew Powell on the brief bits of synthesizer. In its catchy chorus, both Ian and David do these low masculine backing vocals, and they contrast fantastically with Kate's high feminine leading voice. And that mandolin played by Kate's brother Paddy Bush is just a cherry on the top of this little musical cake. There's not too much to say about this one, but it's still a decent song, and is, of course, the first of Kate's songs to utilize backing male vocals, something she would eventually use more of in some of her later songs over the years. Maybe you'll fall in love with a song and never get out again. Afterwards is "L'amour sounds something like you." Like Feel It, this too has a bit of a sensual and even sexual edge to it, while managing to be somewhat subtle about it. And I do emphasize somewhat, of course. "You came out of the night, wearing a mask in white color." So is Kate Bush singing about Tuxedo Mask from Sailor Moon? "My eyes were shining on the wine and your aura." Turns out she's just hallucinating and thinks the wine bottle is a natural person. Much like with Moving, Duncan plays a Fender Rhodes piano, and he does just as fine here as he did there. And in the chorus, Kate sings that she's hanging on the old goose moon, which sounds like the name of an old English pub. Or some kind of fancy whiskey. Actually, however, though, upon a bit of research, Goose Moon, or Goose Month, is apparently a Native American term for when Canadian geese fly back from the south, especially when there happens to be a full moon out then. She goes on to say that "you look like an angel sleeping it off a station." Okay then, so maybe she's singing about either Mary Jane Watson or Padme Amidala. Of course, sexuality is often a theme in many of Kate Bush's songs, as we've noted here, and she would explore similar ideas that, in fact, were rarely touched upon at the time, if even back then at all, such as with Kashka from Baghdad from her second album, Lionheart, which I hope to cover later this year. In the second verse, she mentions that her heart is thrown to the pebbles and boatmen. I knew I spotted something odd the last time I walked down that nice pebble beach in Exmouth. Anyway, after another nice chorus, we get a rather pleasant outro as the music slows and eventually dies down. The closing guitar bit at the very end definitely reminds me a lot of a particular 4-note riff from Pink Floyd's "Shine On You Crazy Diamond." And I wouldn't be surprised at all if that did in fact have some form of influence on this in particular. Then we get hit in the soft spot by Them Heavy People. This, along with Moving, were released as singles in Japan, which I can imagine so and why. Kate already has a sense of youth and innocence as well as cuteness, so it's expected that she would have some appeal there. Anyway, this song has a jaunty mood and beat, and it mostly deals with philosophy and spiritual teaching, as Kate starts off singing about rolling the ball to her, which might represent life's choices and decisions being passed down to her. The heavy people arrived in a rather inconvenient time as Kate was hiding in a room in her mind. Although I wouldn't blame her too much, though. I get into a similar state after having to sit through a marathon of Teen Titans Go episodes. They made her look at herself, and she saw it all, realizing that she had shut the people out of her life. So she decides to take this opportunity and be tutored by wonderful teachers, so that she can work hard on her mind. I think I tried to do something similar like that during the quarantine lockdowns back in 2020. Can't tell if it had very good results or not. Then she learns that everyone has a heaven inside. I guess heaven on earth suddenly has a whole new meaning. Countless multiple heavens to be exact, each within every one of us. In the chorus, she gets hit in the soft spot by them heavy people, as they help her out, rolling the ball to her. I guess Kate really likes a good soft game of fetch. Then in the second verse, she mentions certain individuals like George Gurdjieff and Jesus Christ as examples of such spiritual teachers and philosophers that she reads about. The heavy people open up doorways to her, building up her body and breaking her emotionally. And it's all such a lovely feeling to little Kate, wanting to know and learn more from such a young age as hers, discovering and developing oneself and learning to master one's own life. Kate would continue this theme of seeking out knowledge and enlightenment with songs such as Sat in Your Lap, which I delved a bit into back in my Dreaming review, so feel free to check that out in case you hadn't already. After that is the penultimate track, Room for the Life. A more mellow piece as we start with the usual piano, which wouldn't sound out of place in an Elton John song. Then, as some of the more other conventional instruments return into play, like the bass and the drums, Kate sings about what is pretty much a celebration of women, femininity, and motherhood in particular, what makes them special and unique, trying to prove to be better, but not needing to get heavy with them. Especially since them people are already getting heavy and rolling the ball to them. They never die for long while they've got that little life to live for, where it's hid inside. At least for those strong enough to push through and survive such labour. There's room for life in their womb. Again, I do refer to my previously snarky comment, but still. The embrace of parenthood is quite clear and apparent here, especially in the chorus. Inside of you can be two, so it seems to be twins then. What I kind of like about this is that there's no feeling of cynicism or chauvinism in it. It doesn't try to be in your face about it or try to blame men for all of women's problems. It's a simple tribute to women in general and their differences, what can make them strong, what they can be, and what they can do. Now that's a good feminist message and a true demonstration of girl power. Maurice Purr, to play the drums on Strange Phenomena, Kite, and Wuthering Heights, as well as did session drumming for many artists like Peter Gabriel, John Anderson, Mike Oldfield, Brian Ferry, Paul McCartney, and so on, plays what's known as a boom bam, a very unique kind of percussion instrument, sort of like a love child between bongo drums and a xylophone. And near the end, Ian plays some beer bottles by blowing into them. At least Kate and crew seem to have some creativity and imagination with what they may play with in the recording studio. And so, our album concludes with its title track, The Kick Inside. Another piano-heavy and orchestral ballad, but with suddenly a taboo subject to deal with between the lines of its lyrical content. Inspired by the folk ballad of Lizzie One, this deals with an incestuous relationship between a sister and a brother that results in the sister's pregnancy and eventually her suicide. And Kate decided to name her first album after this song here and have it be the last on the track listing. I honestly don't know whether to compliment that. The whole lyrics seem to play out like a note of sorts, with Kate recalling how she had pulled down her lace and chins, and complimenting her brother in having the face of a genius. And geniuses are certainly indeed beautiful, am I right? She'll send her love to Zeus, at least when he's not having to deal with his son Hercules. And by the time he reads this, she'll be well in touch, giving it all in a moment or two for you. Then, when she feels the kick inside, the unborn child as the result of their affair, it fills her with so much guilt, shame, and dishonor that it makes her feel the need to leave even him behind. No more being under the quilt to keep warm. She then says that he must lose her like an arrow shot into the killer storm, indeed implying that she may have committed suicide after all, taking the child with her in the process and making this note a suicide note to be exact, because she doesn't want him to bear just as much shame as well as she has. In a demo for this track, the connection to the original story was much more transparent, as in the second verse, Kate flat out mentions Lizzie Wan's story, but in the final version, she instead mentions old mythology. I guess to make it less obvious? But the theme still seems to remain to some capacity, especially since, do bear in mind, the gods, including Zeus, in Greco-Roman mythology, were somewhat surprisingly incestuous. Mythology and folklore were really weird. The song itself ends with a repeat of its first verse, as if a kind of bookend of sorts, but stops at a line of, by the time you read this, giving this downer ending a somewhat uncertain and unresolved ending and feeling to go out on. So, quite the subversive way to close out your album there, hon. But anyways, this album is fantastic. I know it's obvious, but considering a lot of things in this, from Kate's songwriting and vocal talents, not to mention her age at the time, as well as Andrew Powell's production and even David Gilmour's significant contribution in producing a few tracks, as well as the few individuals, or several individuals, that recorded and performed some of the instruments for this album, it's quite impressive. Whether back then in 1978, or even to this day after 45 years, the instrumentations are heavenly and beautiful. Almost as beautiful as Kate's own vocals, making each and every track a worthy listener. Not just the well-known songs like The Man with the Child in His Eyes and Wuthering Heights, but also stuff like the saxophone song, Strange Phenomena, James and the Cold Gun, and Them Heavy People. And it would seem that some people thought similarly back then as well, since this album managed to reach number 3 in the UK Albums Chart, number 2 in Belgium, Finland, and New Zealand, and even number 1 in Portugal and the Netherlands. It got a platinum certification in a few certain countries, and even had a quite amount of downloads just last year. No doubt due to Kate's sudden resurgence of popularity, thanks to some of her songs appearing in media such as Stranger Things, Handmaid's Tale, and A Man Called Otto. So while I would say go check it out any way you can, chances are good at least one of you out there already had. But if some or most of you only know of her from Running Up That Hill and Stranger Things, check out the rest of her songs and albums, this debut here included. So, what do you people at home think? You think this is a good first impression of Kate Bush? And if you were to introduce someone like a close friend or family member to Kate Bush, would you start with this or another album of hers? And what would be your favourite Kate Bush album? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Next time, we look at another debut album from the 70s with a really obscure prog rock band simply known as Camel.